Street Talk is the Eric from the Eric Street Talk blog. Currently at this amazing hipster coffee shop in Hanoi called V Espresso. Superb. Anyways, I wanted to do a quick lecture in terms of giving some practical tips in terms of how to get into the zone when shooting street photography. One of the most difficult things I have when I'm out shooting street photography is to kind of get into the zone where you don't become self-conscious anymore. You're out just shooting and the photos almost feel like they shoot themselves, meaning you're out shooting the streets, you don't have any fears, you don't self-criticize yourself, you don't judge yourself, and you don't hesitate before taking images. And when I'm in the zone, that's when I'm the happiest, that's when I'm the most creative, that's when I'm the most bold, that's when I try to do more risky compositions and try to take my street photography to the next level. And so how do you get into the zone? These are some practical tips I would give you. So number one, kill all distractions. One of the biggest issues I have is I'm kind of like a pigeon. Whenever I'm doing anything and then suddenly my phone vibrates or someone calls my name or something on TV shows up, I'm so easily distracted. And in today's world especially, it's so hard to not be distracted and to focus. And to get into the zone is to kill all distractions. For example, your cell phone, listen to music, headphones. I think that when I'm shooting street photography, the best is when I'm not looking at my phone, so I'll usually turn my phone to airplane mode or turn it off completely. I don't listen to music because when I'm listening to music, it doesn't allow me to hear conversations on the street or potentially listen to cars that might run me over. And also kill other distractions like worrying about your life, some sort of argument you might have had with your partner the other day, some nasty thing someone might have said to you, stress or drama at work. Don't worry about any of these distractions and just really focus on the shooting, which is the most important part. Another tip is to shoot solo. Often when it comes to street photography, for me, I like to shoot a lot with other people because I see photography as a social activity. I like the company other people give me. I like to have coffee, and often a lot of the shooting I do is actually when I'm teaching workshops. However, I feel that if you want to make the best photos and to be more in the zone, it's best to shoot solo because for any of those guys who have ever traveled by themselves, you kind of know the wonderful freedom that comes by being solo. You don't go according to someone else's schedule. There's no other people to distract you. Often when I'm shooting with other photographers, I'm more focused on the conversation rather than actually shooting images, which is fine because, if I want to do a more social thing. However, once again, if your goal is to go out and be in the zone and be focused on your photography, try to shoot by yourself. Another tip I have is, take some time to warm up. So before you do any sort of physical activity, people generally recommend you to do warm-ups. Or even when I find myself writing, I need to write a few sentences or paragraphs before I could really warm up and get into the zone. Or if you have an older car, you have to let your engine warm up before going full throttle. I also feel the same thing as in street photography is when I first start shooting the first 5 or 10 minutes, I'm very self-conscious. And it's not only about till maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes, maybe even an hour in, where I start to feel more confident, where I don't think of myself as an individual taking photos. I just kind of wander the streets and the photos seem to take themselves. So know that when it comes to trying to get into the zone, try not to rush the process and just start out by clicking and making photos because the first few photos are always the hardest to shoot because you don't either feel inspired or you don't see anything interesting. But the more you click, the more you can kind of warm up your trigger finger and then you'll kind of get into the zone a lot easier. All right, set it and forget it. So one of the practical tips I have is when I'm shooting street photography, I'm a big fan of using P mode, which stands for program mode, in which the camera automatically chooses the aperture and shutter speed. I'll usually keep my ISO relatively high, like 800, 1600, or even 3200. The way I determine that is depending on how dark or bright it is. So if it's super bright outside, ISO 800 is usually fine to have a fast shutter speed. And if I'm shooting when it's a little bit darker, 1600 or even 3200, essentially I'm trying to eliminate motion blur. And for an autofocus mode, most of the days I just use center point autofocus. And once you could set it and forget it, you don't really worry so much about the cameras. Sydney's telling me to slow down. I'm having some espresso, so I'm talking really fast. And when it comes to shooting street photography, by setting and forgetting it, it allows you to kind of get into the zone by not worrying so much about your camera settings. Often when I'm shooting and I'm switching between aperture priority or manual focus, autofocus, it really distracts me from the shooting process. I feel that nowadays our digital cameras are so good. I say let the cameras do the thinking for us in terms of the technical settings and use our scarce resources as photographers to compose, to get closer, to work the scene, overcome our fears, and so forth. Another practical tip I have is to shoot in crowded places. So if you're shooting down an alleyway and you're just by yourself, it's easy to be self-conscious because everyone sees you coming. But if you're in downtown areas where it's a little more crowded, you just kind of begin to blend in with the crowd. And so, for example, in this photograph, I'm shooting in New York City on Fifth Avenue where there's a lot of action, and I'm able to get really close to my subjects. This lady I photographed with a Ricoh GR 28mm macro mode, and I'm literally within breathing distance of her. And I took like a photo or two, and then she turned around and looked at me, and that's how I was able to get that intimacy. And when I'm shooting in crowded places, I feel like I just become one with the crowd, where I see myself as like another salmon in the stream of fish. And so for you, if you want to be less self-conscious and try to focus on getting more into the zone, I recommend trying to get into crowded places. So a downtown area, or if there's a festival or a fair or some sort of big public happening, try to shoot where there's more people. Another practical tip, this is very just self-evident, is just wear comfortable clothing. The worst is especially when you're shooting somewhere where it's really hot, that you're wearing baggy jeans and it's just so hot and miserable. And also, I think having a comfortable pair of shoes is probably more important than having an expensive camera in street photography, because the more comfortable your shoes, the longer you can shoot without, having too much weight on you. Also, another tip is if you have a backpack, try not to put too much stuff in there. Same thing goes with messenger bag. The lighter you are, the more you can focus on your photography. Also, another tip is I always try to wear all black clothing when I'm out shooting street photography. The reason is if you're wearing all black and you have a black camera, your camera just kind of blends in with you, and also you kind of blend in with the crowd. If you're wearing a magenta orange shirt, you're obviously going to stick out like a sore thumb. So try to wear comfortable clothing, shoes that are comfortable, last you a long time, as well as try to pack lightly. And the last tip is don't try too hard. I also feel that in street photography, the harder I try to make a good photo, the less likely I am actually to make a good photo. Some of my best photos are when I'm just kind of relaxing and chilling and not forcing myself to make a good photo, and the photo just presents itself to me. So for example, like this is a photo I shot on the BART. It's the subway in Northern California on the way to San Francisco. And I just see this lady just kind of thinking, contemplating life, looking outside. And I was just reading a book, and I looked up, I saw her, took the camera out of my backpack, had the camera in P mode, took maybe 4 or 5 photos, and I made this image. And so treat the same thing with street photography. Is of course you want to try your best when you're out shooting street photography, but don't try to force yourself to make the best photos in the world. Often the more pressure you put on yourself, the worse you're going to perform. And a lot of athletes know this. A lot of athletes choke because there's too much pressure on them, whereas they could easily make a shot when nobody's watching them. And yeah, so remember that in street photography, getting into the zone means becoming less self-conscious. It means becoming more creative, more fearless, more brave. Hopefully some of these tips will help you in your street photography journey. And if you guys have any other tips, leave them in the comments. All right, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Peace out.